It's time for a Drummer Nation. My next guest is a buddy of mine, Scott von Ravensberg. Thanks for doing this, Scott.
Michael, good to see you again.
Same here. You're originally from Los Angeles, right?
Los Angeles. I grew up in La Mirada.
And you came up with a real happening scene when you were a kid. You were playing with some pretty cool ensembles. Tell me about that.
High school was, I had a band director that respected big band music and was very much into the whole swing thing from the bebop era through the big band era. And it was really an exciting time because LA was hot and busy back then. It was the late 60s. And there were a lot of things going on. So having a band director that appreciated that, the band would go to competitions and win competitions around California. So it was good. It was an exciting time to have been part of the music business.
And weren't you part of that Kenton Neophonic Junior Orchestra or something like that?
I was. I started working with that band when I was a senior in high school in my first year of college at Cerritos College. Stan Kenton had the Junior Neophonic. There was opportunity for people to play in an orchestral kind of setting with a big band, and it was amazing music. I had an opportunity to work with some great people. Oliver Nelson was one of the conductors that conducted the band. Plus, the musicians in the band were great. There were a lot of good players there that wound up doing a lot of recording and TV stuff in the Los Angeles area.
Great training too.
Absolutely, yeah. It was. You had to be able to read. You had to be able to play concepts of music. LA was all about knowing different styles of music. So it was a good proving ground to start in that young age and work up until now. It's been a benefit to have been around folks. I was in high school hanging around with guys that had been on Buddy's band or Woody's band and Stan Kenton's band, and it was a lot of information was being passed back and forth with all of those fellows. So you always learned how to take care of business.
Must have held you in good stead with those different styles and taking care of business when you worked with Ray Charles.
Oh yeah, Ray was the ultimate playing styles. Ray was really one of the most ideal gigs ever because it was big band music, it was blues music, it was country music. It was everything that you could imagine playing in the style that it was meant to be. That's how Ray did everything. So there was a lot of different type of genres that were handled just playing in Ray's band alone.
Well, Ray had his own way of leading a band, I'm sure.
Yeah, he was a little hard on the drummers. He would use his feet for the drummers to see the time, and he would use his head to conduct the orchestra. When you see him moving his head like this, he was actually conducting the music like this with his head. Of course, when I was there was no mercy at all. When I first started, the first gig I worked was in Fenway Park in Boston, and it was outside, it was nighttime, and I was probably about 45 or 50 feet from Ray. And having no clue what I was looking at when I first joined the band and got on the bandstand with him, outside in that type of context, it was pretty crazy.
Trial by fire.
A trial by fire.
And you worked with him on several stints. When did you work with him?
I worked with him in 73, 75, 76, and a little bit in 77, and I went back out again in 1985. That was the last time I'd worked with him.
He must have liked you.
He did. We once we got to know each other, it was pretty easy to play with him. He's been known to be hard on musicians, and he was always hardest on drummers because drummers tend to be in charge of the band. They tend to want to play the time. You can't do that with Ray. You have to listen to where the time sits with Ray. That being said, Ray was a wonderful leader in terms of playing the music. He knew what he wanted to hear. It was that way, as consistent as a clock, as a human clock. So it was easy once you got to know him that's where it was going to be. And if he decided to change the tempos, he would let you know where it was. And that way it was fairly simple.
Tell me how you knew when you lost an argument with Ray, that it was when that was it.
Ray used to have a thing where he would cross his arms. He'd talk to you like this. And when he was done with the conversation, he would do this. And that was the end of the story. And I was watching the movie Ray, and I couldn't believe how Jamie Foxx actually understood that that's how it worked. He understood the mannerisms. He understood every nuance of what Ray did. So I'm watching the movie with my wife, and they're having the conversation about Atlantic, to the president of Atlantic Records, and the guy says, Ray, we can't let you have your masters. And Ray did that, and I just started howling. My wife said, quiet, what are you doing? I said, you don't understand. This guy, Jamie Foxx, has made it perfect of how Ray was.
Now, during that period, I guess when you were a kid with the Kent Neophonic Junior Orchestra, and before going out on the road in earnest, you were doing a lot of studio work in L.A., right?
I was doing some studio work, not a lot. I did a lot of live gigs. I did a backing of shows and things. I worked at a lot of the theaters there, and I was able to work with a number of artists out there, which was because I had learned how to read in high school, and it was important to learn how to do that and then learn how to play the styles of music. I had an opportunity, plus growing up with guys that were all on road bands coming to Los Angeles to do the recording. I had an opportunity to work with a lot of good people that would always pass work on in Los Angeles back then. This was the late 60s, early 70s. Everybody was busy. There was a lot of things going on. So I had the good fortune to work for A&M, CBS, and NBC. I did some stuff recording with Ray for a Scotch brand recording tape, and there were a lot of jingles that I played on, and there were a lot of different things. So there were shows, there were club dates. In fact, they were casuals in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. The club dates, I didn't learn that name until I moved to Atlanta.
It's an East Coast term.
It is.
In LA, they're casual.
They were casuals, right?
You worked with some singers, too?
I worked with Olivia Newton-John. I went to college with Bobby McFerrin. So there was some real interesting folks that I got to work with. I mean, it was a lot of people.
I know you worked with Robert Goulet.
I worked with Robert Goulet for a couple of years back in the 80s. And that was another big band gig. I loved playing big band music. And that's what I cut my eye teeth on. The reason I got the Ray Charles gig was from a friend of mine who grew up in Whittier, John Hernandez. All of you folks know John Hernandez as Johnny Vatos. He also told me about the Zappa gig, and the Zappa gig, that scared the hell out of me. I couldn't play that stuff to save my behind.
Not to mention reading it.
Oh, God, there was no way I could do any of that. I was just a big band drummer that loved playing music, so I had to learn as much as I could. But there was another kid out there named David Krieger, who was just a wonderful player, a young guy. When I was coming up, he was just coming up. He had studied with Ralph. He went out on the road with Don Ellis's band, and he went out and did the Zappa gig as well. There were just guys. I was fortunate enough to grow up at a time in Los Angeles when there were people doing a lot of things, and the energy was there. The camaraderie was there. The friendship was there. Everybody was working. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you work this? And you go to rehearsal bands. Rehearsal bands we don't hear of much.
I did one of those. It was a Kenton book in LA, a rehearsal band. Yeah. For people who don't know, maybe you young guys, a rehearsal band is guys who and girls get together and play charts and have fun for no apparent reason other than.
Well, the reason was when you get to the studios, you can't make mistakes. So the rehearsal bands would keep your eyes sharp and keep your reading skills together so that you knew what you were going to do so you could do it in one take. And there was a lot of orchestras in LA that could do stuff in one take.
Now, we can't let you go without talking about Freddy Gruber.
Freddy. He was quite the character.
The legendary drum teacher, Freddy Gruber, that you hear all kinds of wonderful drummers talking about, was a unique individual with his own unique style. Is that correct?
That's correct. Very correct. When I was in high school, I won some jazz festival. Louis Belson was one of the adjudicators, and I talked with Louis after the concert, and I asked him if he could be my teacher. I wanted to study with Louis, and he referred me to Hank Belson. Hank Belson is his brother, Henry. Henry used to teach at a place called the Music Stop. And so I started studying with Henry, and I went to a place in Sherman Oaks, the Music Stop, and I'm in the room, and I hear, we're sitting there. Henry was a Jehovah's Witness. Very kind, very, very quiet, very peaceful guy. And we're in the studio, the drum studio, and from next door we hear this foul sailor language. Just the guy next door is hollering at the guy he was studying with. You got to play it like this and MF this, and you got to do. Well, that was my first introduction to Freddy Gruber. Hank looked at me and I looked at him. I'm in high school and I'm going, what is this? I have no idea. And Hank goes, Freddy. Well, as it turns out, most of the guys in L.A., and after a while, most of the guys around the world were coming to Freddy because he knew the mechanics of playing drums. So a few years later, I went and sought Freddy out and learned how to play correctly, if you will, how to hold the stick, how to rebound the stick, how to approach the drum set. And it was Freddy that did that, but Freddy was an adventure unto himself. He was quite a guy.
Well, how long were the lessons?
The lessons could be like 2 or 3 hours, but the lesson wouldn't be you sitting there for 2 or 3 hours. It would be him making meatloaf or going for coffee making coffee and hanging out with the guy that was there before you. And like I say, it was an adventure unto itself, but it was worth it because the things that he taught me benefited me throughout all of the styles of music I played through my entire life in the 55 years I've been playing.
Now, you and I ran into each other. We didn't know each other in L.A., but in Atlanta we met.
Right, exactly.
And you had been doing all the house stuff for the Ritz-Carlton Corporation headquarters there.
Right.
And had enough of that and handed it off to me.
Right. I had been working with the music director there for a couple of years. And the first job that I had there was with a wonderful piano player named Ted Howe and a bass player named Rich Nanista. And it was just wonderful. So I did that for a couple of years, and then it was time to move on because I had just moved there. And Michael came along, and he filled the shoes and did a great job.
Well, I appreciated the gig. We've done a lot of sharing of gigs through the years.
Nice to be able to sit back and go, yeah, I did that.
I live to tell about it.
I did.
Thanks for everything, man.
All right. Thank you, Michael. It's good to see you.